Hello, welcome to another episode. My name is Katie Papo, and this episode is part of a larger series that I'm calling 201010. So it's 20 weeks that goes across the 20 years of my past experience, 10 of which were when I was struggling with food the most to the point where it felt like this was never going to end. And then I had, in a short period of time, some deep internal shifts that I'm going to be teaching you over these 20 weeks that then led to another 10 years. But this one was of freedom and peace and ease with my body and with food. No more food issues, no more binges, no more food noise, just peace. So today, what I wanted to talk about is the weight element, because I know that that's an issue and a sticking point for a lot of people. And this was one of the more counterintuitive shifts that I've personally made. Now, since making this shift, I have not struggled with weight at all. Okay. Whereas it used to be, and this was over 10 years ago now, I was so obsessed with weight. Well, first of all, I worked in the weight loss industry. Okay. I grew up with a mother who was going to Weight Watchers all the time, always focusing on her weight. There was always a scale in the upstairs closet. And then I ended up getting into the weight loss industry myself, which I won't get into in depth now. But I was a personal trainer. Then I became the program director for weight loss resort programs, which is kind of like, if you remember that show, The Biggest Loser, but just think like less boot campy, less insane, more reasonable, but still very much weight loss focused, where people would come and it would be like a weight loss immersion. And I was running that program for a number of years. So I was very much into the weight loss culture. I personally was weighing myself between 4 to 6 times a day. Okay. Probably at my least, I was weighing myself twice a day. So, ironically, during this time, my weight fluctuated more than it ever has in my entire life. There would be periods where I would just gain 25 pounds. And by the way, I'm under 5 feet tall. I am a very small person. So 25 pounds for someone like me in a very short period of time is quite substantial. I was constantly focusing on weight. I want to keep it top of mind so I can always have it under control. This was very much my mentality, which is why it's even more discouraging and heartbreaking to then gain all of that weight back and feel like you're starting over. Because a lot of us, we think, well, I know how to lose the weight. It's just a matter of keeping it off. So what I wanted to go over today is how I did lose the weight, but I also kept it off for the last 10 years. And I do want to clarify something, because even though that's like what I put in the podcast episode title, this is not actually how I think. Like those words, those thoughts of, oh, I've lost the weight and I've kept it off since then. Those words, those thoughts never cross my mind. That's not even how I think now. The way I actually think now is this is just my body and it's the result of how I live. I don't even think in terms of weight anymore. It's not even a thought. And because I know for a lot of us, a goal is we don't want to be weight obsessed, right? We don't want to constantly be thinking about our weight because it's torture to do that. It takes all of our time and energy. But also, we do care about our health. We do care about our weight for whatever reasons, whether it's for aesthetic reasons or health reasons. We do care, but we don't want to constantly be obsessed with it. So then the question becomes this circle, this loop where we're like, well, how do I lose the weight? But I don't want to be obsessed with weight, but I need to focus on weight because if I don't, I'm going to gain weight. And it's like the circle of torture that never ends. So in this episode, I want to show you, even though these are not the terms I would use, how I lost the weight and kept it off. But also, in order to understand that beyond just the surface level, we need to look at some deeper concepts in order to get yourself out of this cycle. And I'm really going to be getting into two primary internal shifts that I made myself that you're definitely capable of making yourself. So that way you can start to reprogram and make these internal shifts. Okay, so that's the plan. You ready? So, the first internal shift that I made, I'm going to summarize into a short mantra that you can remember, and then I'll explain it and give you examples. So, the short mantra is this: process over product. Okay, repeat that with me: process over product. Now, what does this mean? So, essentially, what this means is we want to focus on the process that naturally creates the result, as opposed to hyperfixating on the outcome or the product itself. So let's say that in the past, your goal has been, I want to lose 25 pounds. So what have you been focusing on? You've been focusing on your goal weight, and every day you're getting on the scale and seeing if it's getting closer to your goal weight, right? Now, think about this. Your weight, right? Your body in general, not just your weight, is a result of what? Of how you live. It's a result of how you live, not just your weight. If for example, you're hunched over the computer all day, your shoulders are going to start to become more rounded like this. If you're watching on YouTube or on video, you can see what I'm doing with my shoulders. They're rounded, right? They're hunched over. So if you're constantly sitting like this, your shoulders will start to adapt and they'll start to become more permanently fixed in this position. And it's going to be harder to open them up this way, right? So your body is simply a result of how you live. So your weight is also a side effect of how you live, right? So if you're living a healthy life, you're eating when you're hungry, you're stopping when you're full, you enjoy the food you eat, you move regularly, right? All of these things are very naturally going to lead to a healthy weight, right? Logic would tell us that. Now, here's where a lot of people get tripped up, though. If you're focusing on the numbers on the scale, you're focusing on product, not process. Okay. And in fact, focusing on the number on the scale is actually a huge distraction from the process. And I'm going to explain this. So let's imagine you get on the scale and it's 3 pounds less than what it was last week. What does your mind do? Your mind goes, oh, yay, I lost 3 pounds. This is so great. Now, what's the very next thing your mind does? For me, it would start to calculate. All right, so I lost 3 pounds this week. So if I also lose 3 pounds next week, 3 pounds the week after that, oh, shoot, well, that's still going to take me about 5 months, 6 months to get to my goal weight. Now, notice how now we've lost focus on process. We're trying to manipulate product. Look at what happens to me. I think, oh, shoot, well, next week I need to lose 3 pounds again, preferably 4 pounds. So I definitely can't be having those chips like I had this week. So let me get the chips out of the house. But you know what? I still have half a bag of chips. So maybe I should just finish them all today. You know what? If I have the chips today, you know what? Maybe I can just have one last binge today, get everything bad out of the house, and then I can start really focusing on losing 4 pounds tomorrow. Do you hear the insanity? This was my brain, okay? Or it would go the opposite direction. So let's say I step on the scale and I've gained 3 pounds since last week. Shoot, I'm 3 pounds heavier. Oh my God, now I have even more work to do. Okay, Katie, time to buckle up. It's time to get serious. We're going all in now. Starting today, no chocolate, no chips, no this, no that. But you know what? I still want to have just one last final binge tonight. And then tomorrow is where I'll start my weight loss process. So you see how either way, my obsession with the number on the scale, my obsession with the product is completely distracting me and throwing me off course from my process. Now, this is where everybody gets tripped up. So listen carefully to this, because this is where everybody assumes that what I'm saying is don't think about weight. Don't even worry about anything. Throw away the scale and everything will magically work out. No. Here's what I know to be true. If you currently have a focus, especially a focus you have been obsessed with, like weight, we can't just say, oh, don't focus on that. Okay, well, if I'm not focused on that, what am I supposed to focus on? And moreover, I still want to lose weight. I still want to be a healthy person. So it seems wildly irresponsible to say something like, don't think about it, because then I'm just going to gain weight. So this was my thought process for the longest time. Now, here's the subtle distinction. And in the past episodes, right, if you've been listening the last couple weeks, you've heard me say this mantra many times. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. And I swear, time after time, it has shown me that when I focus on weight, I attract weight. I gain weight. This has been true for so many of my clients too. I've seen this so many times. I'm at the point where this is starting to become the hill that I die on. What we need to get in the habit of is redirecting our focus to what? To what? Where your attention goes, your energy flows. So we need to direct our focus to the process. Now, for somebody who no longer wants to live their life fixated on losing weight, maintaining their weight, we cannot be focused on weight loss programs. Why? Where your attention goes, your energy flows, and you're focusing on the product. This is going to create the exact opposite of what you want. And I can tell you, the more entrenched I became in the weight loss industry for all those years, the more I struggled with my weight more than ever. So another example I'll give you is around binges. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. So if you're hyper focused on not binging, trying not to have a binge today, trying to count the number of days that you're going without a binge, all of this centralizes your attention around what? Binges, right? So basically what you're doing is training your mind to constantly think about binges, which what does that do? It brings binges to the forefront of your attention, which is what you don't want. So you're now optimizing your life around binges, just like you're optimizing your life around weight. Make sense? So by focusing on process over product, right? The product would be no binges, right? That's what I want, no binges. What's the process though? The process is creating a healthy relationship with food, a peaceful relationship with your own mind, with your own body, where it wouldn't even occur to you to binge, right? That's how I've quote unquote maintained not binging. Not because I have a calendar while I'm crossing off my days I didn't binge today. In fact, I think that's counterproductive. Why? Because it keeps you focused on binges. Instead, what have I been focusing on? Creating the habits that give me peace around food, creating the habits that help me listen to my body. Because when I do those things, it is very natural for binge eating to not be part of that, right? I can't be peaceful with food, listening to my body, and still binge, right? They can't coexist. The more peaceful I am around food, the more I naturally listen to my body and food becomes a non-issue. Binges aren't even relevant. I don't have to try to not binge. So notice how, because I focused on the process, the product happened on its own as the side effect. And what most people misunderstand, and this is especially people who tend to like be really controlling and always want to have a death grip on everything in their life, they think that if you're not staring at the scale, if you're not counting your binge-free days, it means you don't care. It means it's not a priority. It means you're letting yourself go. That's why I say it's not just about not focusing on the product, the no binges, the number on the scale. It's important to redirect the focus to the process that will turn you into the person who doesn't think about binges, the process that turns you into the person who doesn't need to think about weight. This is doable for you. This is done through practice. Just like you've done it already, by the way, you just trained yourself to obsess about the weight. You trained yourself to obsess about the food through repetition. What I did is I redirected my focus to the process of what it takes to become that different person. And during that process, by the way, anytime during that process, I'd catch my mind going into the old residue thoughts of how I used to think about weight and binges and all that stuff, because that definitely happened. I would redirect my focus back. And it's so easy to get swept back up in the direction that you've been thinking in for so many years. We don't even realize sometimes we slip back into that. So much of my work with my clients is catching them when they go back and then redirecting their focus to what part of the process they're working on right now. And that might change. Like if they're in the first part of my program, they're focused on this part of the process. If they're focused on the second part, maybe they're more focused on listening to their body and all that stuff. So whatever it is, there's always a focus. There's never an absence of a focus. So it's not like, oh, just don't think about your weight. The end. It's, we don't have to think about weight. We are so busy focusing on this part of your process. Okay. So you always have a very clear North Star, and every part of that process should be completely aligned with your North Star. So for example, and by the way, if you haven't listened to my North Star episodes, there are a few episodes back, go and listen. But the idea of the North Star is you have this central focus. So let's say that my North Star is freedom with food. I want to feel a sense of freedom with food. Any process that I choose must be completely aligned with cultivating that freedom. So if I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to focus on the process, but then I join a process that requires me to hyper obsess with counting my macros and my calories and weighing myself every day and making sure I don't eat past 4 p.m. and that there's 6 hours between every meal. Is that cultivating freedom? No, it's not aligned with my North Star. Is it even cultivating peace if that's my North Star? No. So for a lot of us, it's we focus on process, but most likely that process is going to be very different than the processes that you've been through before, because the processes you've been through before were weight loss focused. Now we're talking about creating a new identity, a new normal, a new relationship with food that's healthy, peaceful, and free. So every part of that process needs to feed that. And then when that's your focus, where your attention goes, your energy flows, that's what you create. Once you create that, or even as you create that, what are the natural side effects? Binges start to become less. Binges, even when you have them, they're much smaller. They're not as big of a deal. Your weight naturally starts to go down, right? Why? Because you're engaging in the process that gives you more connection with your body, that gives you more peace around food, less anxiety around food, less cravings around food, less urgency around food. All of these things will naturally create the side effects that we want. So know that I'm not saying, oh, just stop thinking about weight. I'm saying you need to know exactly where to direct your focus, because you've been focused on weight for so long. So if you don't have something else to focus on, you're naturally going to go back to your default, which is going to be weight, which is going to be trying to get rid of binges and all the things that you've ever done before. And a lot of us, we have the misconception, oh, well, the more I focus on my weight, the faster I'll get there. This I have seen so many times to be the opposite of the case. And I've seen it with my clients too, because over the years, I've had many different people come to work with me in my program, and I've seen the pattern. The people who come in and are so process oriented, like they see, okay, Katie gave me these exercises for this week. She gave me these lessons to listen to. So my focus for this week is to do these exercises and listen to these lessons and be really engaged with that process. Those are the people who stop obsessing about food faster or lose weight with more ease, as opposed to the people who are like, okay, I joined this program and I've got to make sure that I don't gain any weight during this process. I have to make sure I binge as little as possible. Those are the people who are not actually focused on the work I actually just gave them. They're focused on what they've always been focused on. It's actually distracting you from doing the work that's going to make the biggest difference for you. I've just seen it so many times. It's crazy. And I've lived it so many times. For God's sake, how many times have I lived this lesson again and again in different areas of my life? Okay, so that's the first internal shift. So remember the mantra? Process over product. Hopefully, I hammered it in enough for you. Now let's go to the second internal shift. Now, the second internal shift, I'm going to give you a mantra to remember that one too. You ready? This second mantra: decades over deadlines. Decades over deadlines. I'm going to tell you what that means too. So, this is essentially the difference between having a short term mindset and a long term mindset. Now, most people have a short term mindset, not because they don't think long term mindset doesn't work, but they think the short term mindset gets them the results faster. And what I now know to be true is the shortcut, or the perceived shortcut, is the thing that doesn't actually even move the needle at all. It only feels like it does, right? Because we've lost a lot of weight, but then we gain it all back, right? So it feels like we've made these big changes, but we haven't actually made progress in a new trajectory. So what does it mean, though, exactly to have that long-term thinking process? What does it mean, decades over deadlines? So think about it this way. If you're saying I'm focusing on decades, it's not that it's going to take you decades to get the result. What it means is you're thinking along the lines of, what am I building that I would want to continue living for decades? Whereas with the short-term thinking, we focus on strategies that are not sustainable. Like when my mom was joining Weight Watchers all the time, in and out, like who can sustain that? Who would want to sustain that? You got to go to these meetings, you're constantly focused on weight, and you're listening to people say things like, oh yeah, I just had that peanut for lunch, but surprisingly, it was very filling. But this, for most of us, we don't actually want to live like this. The only reason we do is we think we have to in order to get the results that we want. That's the process that we've committed to, but it's not the right process. Not the right process for our North Star. If our North Star is freedom and peace and health and ease and sustainability, that's not a good, and enjoyment, right? And nourishment. That is not a good process to create any of those things. What it does is it creates more obsession, more starvation, which then triggers more binges. It's not the right process. So some of us, we might be process oriented, but we're just in the wrong strategy. But for a lot of us, we choose these processes because we're in short-term thinking still, because we've seen the ad for Weight Watchers or whatever thing that you've joined. And it says, oh, well, Shelly lost 60 pounds in only 5 months. Well, that's amazing. I would love some version of that, so let me join. Meanwhile, what are we not seeing? Shelly lost the 60 pounds and then she gained back 80 because she was engaged in this short-term deadline thinking. So when we're thinking in terms of decades, think about, again, this aligns with the North Star. What are you building? Do you want more Weight Watchers over time? Or do you want more peace over time? Do you want more freedom over time? Do you want more health, nourishment, joy? All of these things, we do have to continuously cultivate them over time. But that's a beautiful process of growth, where if you told me I had to work on anything for the next several decades or even for the rest of my life, I would be totally on board with becoming a better friend to myself, becoming the healthiest, happiest, most peaceful version of myself that I can be. I already want that. Those are my North Stars. Of course, all these other negative things are going to gradually weed themselves out of my life. I don't have to focus on pushing them away if I focus on growing their opposite, right? Like we don't have to try to push away negativity. We just practice being more positive, right? That's a very simplified way of saying it, but it's true. If you want to get rid of something, you focus on its opposite. Do you see what I mean? So let me give you another example of this decades over deadlines mentality. And I'm going to give you a non-food example so you can start to wrap your head around it in another way. So I have had this wrist issue. It was really bad. The worst it was about a year ago. I couldn't even reach back to put on my seatbelt. Still putting weight on it, I feel pain. So my wrist, I know it needs to get stronger and I know it needs to get more mobile. Now, until recently, I was focused on just getting out of pain. So it was like a daily check in. Is the pain there? Oh, the pain is still there. Crap, I'm not progressing. Is the pain there? Oh, crap. Now it's even worse than before. So then, because I was so pain focused and everything was centralized around, I need to get rid of this pain, I was avoiding putting weight on it. I was resting it, over resting it to the point where if you over rest something and you don't use it, we become even weaker. So by trying to avoid pain, I was actually doing things that would create more pain, which is exactly what was happening. Now, what I'm doing is I'm working on creating more strength and flexibility in my hands, in my fingers, in my wrists, in my shoulders, in the whole chain to build more strength. I'm no longer focused on getting rid of pain, right? Where your attention goes, your energy flows. If I'm constantly focusing on pain, 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 what am I attracting? More and more pain. But if I'm constantly focusing now and I redirect my energy to strength and mobility, what am I creating more of? Strength and mobility. And I can trust, because I'm a logical person, that the more strength and mobility I have, naturally over time as a side effect, it'll probably happen that the pain reduces, right? And notice I'm not putting a deadline on it. I'm not saying, well, if in 3 months I haven't gotten rid of pain, blah, 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 blah. No, I'm thinking in terms of decades, not deadlines, because I can't control when the pain actually goes away. But what I can control is showing up for the process. Remember, process over product. I'm showing up for the process. I'm always just focusing on strength and mobility. That's something I can definitely focus on for decades. I'm long-term thinking, not short-term thinking. You see the difference. All right, so now I'm going to give you an analogy that's going to tie all of this together. It's going to tie in both shifts, okay? The first internal shift was what? Process over product. The second internal shift was what? Decades over deadlines. And what's the overarching mantra that we've been saying the last few weeks? Where your attention goes, your energy flows, okay? So here's the analogy. Imagine you decide you want to grow a garden. So what you do is you go outside, you plant some seeds, and then every day you go out with a ruler because you've decided you want your roses to be 6 inches tall by Friday. You've decided your tomatoes need to be visible on the vine by the first of next month. And you've decided that every seed you've planted must sprout by the end of this week. Now, already you're going to stop me there and be like, Katie, that is the stupidest way to think about growing a garden. And so I might say, okay, well, how would you do it? And what are you going to say? So after you plant the seeds, don't focus on the height of the flowers. Just focus on showing up every day, watering every day, rotating the plants for the proper amount of sunlight. Like, don't worry, Katie. The flowers are going to take care of themselves. The tomatoes are going to take care of themselves. You just focus on creating the conditions for that. That's it. And I might say, okay, fine. So I'll focus on that process. And then every day, 4 times a day, I'll just go out there and I'll stare at the plants. And when I'm not in the garden, I'll think about the garden. I'll think about how I want it to grow and I'll think about how tall I want everything to be. And you'd say, no, what are you talking about? You don't need to think about it. You need to focus on the garden. And I might say, but I want it to grow. So I should be thinking about it all the time. Say, no. All you have to do is focus on the process, but you don't have to be obsessed about it. You don't have to think about it, right? You just go and do the things that are important to take care of the garden. That's it, right? So it seems so obvious with this, right? But then when it comes to weight, it's like, no, if I don't think about it, then it won't happen. That's not how it works. That's not how nature works. The way your body will flourish is the same way a garden will flourish. The way your mind will flourish is also the same way that a garden will flourish. The garden will grow even if you're not staring at it. Your weight will change even if you don't have a scale in your house. I actually encourage all my clients before they even start my program, I say, get rid of your scale, throw it off the roof, donate it, break it with a hammer. I don't care. Just don't have a scale in your house. It's a distraction from what's actually going to get you what you want. It's actually going to prevent you from getting what you want. And the proof of that is if it worked, it would have worked. You would have been able to sustain that. Like the whole reason I've been able to quote unquote sustain my weight, even though it doesn't feel like I'm sustaining anything, is because I've been process oriented and I've been focusing on decades instead of deadlines. So with the garden, it's not that, oh, my garden has bloomed, now I don't do anything and I don't think about it ever. No, you still go out every day, you water, you rotate for the sun, you still do that, but it's not a drama. It's just part of your day. It's just part of how you live. And that's what I feel like has happened for me and for many others. If you've heard stories on my podcast from Amy, who else? Johanna, Grace, my mom, like all these people have had the exact same outcome where they were hyper obsessed with weight. It was going up and down all the time. They redirected to the process, right? And we're also fully engaged with that process. Like they literally did what I told them to do rather than just focusing on, oh, I have to not binge or I can't gain an ounce. No, they were just saying, okay, I need to go through this process. And then the more they just keep their focus on that, then you can say, oh, well, I've actually, after I lost those 30 pounds, like it just kind of stayed off. But that's not because you were keeping it away. You weren't pushing it away saying, stay away from me. I need to maintain this. Just the way that you live now naturally creates that result. Just by watering the plants naturally makes them grow. It's just the laws of nature. It's just the laws of nature. And this is how we create a new normal for ourselves. So for me, I live in a different normal now than what I lived in over 10 years ago. Over 10 years ago, my normal was constantly thinking about food, counting my binge-free days, trying to minimize how much sugar I was having, counting the grams of sugar, like all of those things were my focus. Now, those things don't even occur to me because my normal is so different. Things that used to occupy my mind 99% of my time now don't even cross my mind at all. That's what I mean when I say new normal. So for you, the result is not your job. The process is your job. Like I've said, I could technically say I've kept all this weight off for 10 years, but that's not my present reality. My present reality is my body's just a result of how I live. The end. It's like when my clients say things like, oh my God, this has never happened before, but I forgot that there was chocolate in my desk drawer from 4 days ago and I just opened the drawer today and I've never forgotten about chocolate in my entire life. Like that's not the kind of result that can be forced. You can't manufacture a result like that. That result is a side effect of the fact that they're not thinking about food as much. Why? Because they're focused on something else now. It's naturally going to happen, but when it does, it starts to feel like a miracle. Why? Because it felt effortless. That's where the effortlessness comes in. It's not that we don't put in any effort, but things like that feel effortless because of the effort we put into other places. If I'm putting more effort into peace, and then I have that kind of experience where I just see chocolate in my desk and I still feel peaceful about it, that is the side effect. You see? So this is how it works. So these are the two internal shifts. And I hope I was able to explain it in a way that you can start to wrap your mind around a little more, because I know if you've been thinking one way for a long time, it can almost seem like mental gymnastics to try to think in a new way. But these are the game changers. These are the game changers for both me, and now I've seen for many years for my clients too. So with that, I will say see you next week, and I'll talk to you very soon.